Today we're getting under the hood with Teyonna Bowman, a mother, daughter, sister, a 2-time breast cancer survivor, menopause advocate, and the founder of Pausitive Outlook, an outlet for healing and sharing her own journey that has evolved into a platform that empowers women, especially younger survivors, to navigate life after cancer and the complexities of medically induced menopause. Through Pausitive Outlook, she creates connection, education, and community via social media and in-person experiences. Teyonna also serves as a dedicated volunteer with the Know Your Lemons Foundation, the American Cancer Society, Cancer Action Network, and the Tiger Lily Foundation. Teyonna lives in the San Francisco Bay Area with her husband, 2 kids, and their energetic Vizsla. She finds joy in long walks, good company, and tear-filled laughs with the people she loves. Wow, welcome, Teyonna.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I'm so happy to be here with you today.
Oh, I'm thrilled to be getting under the hood with you. Particularly, it's season 4, Women's March for Mental Wellness, and I'm excited to share your journey. If it's okay, let's get going.
Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. I love this question because everybody has an inflection point and these moments where there's massive change that occurs in our lives. What would you say your inflection point was that got you on the mental health and wellness journey, Teyonna?
I would actually say that I've had 3 inflection points. So a little bit counter to your question, but there are 3 times in my somewhat recent past that have really stood out for me and have impacted my journey towards mental health. And so the first would be when I was first diagnosed with cancer. I had just turned 35. I had just finished nursing my daughter, and my world was flipped. It took a while to come to terms with what a diagnosis like that even meant, not having a mother or grandmother who had had a history of breast cancer, not having the gene myself, and not really being familiar with what that journey could look like. It really changed things, but strangely, I found a peace that I didn't expect shortly after my surgeries and going through chemo. I actually found a peace with saying no in my life for one of the first times. I am a people pleaser and have consistently tried to do all the things for everyone for good reasons. You know, I like to be helpful. I like to be a connector, but that really wore me down. And it wasn't until my cancer diagnosis and being so tired from chemo and feeling like I could finally say no without any guilt, without any regrets, and care for myself in the way that I needed to. I was surrounded by an extremely supportive family and friend network. And so I think that certainly helped. But saying no while I was recovering really worked wonders for my own self-love and self-care. And it helped me reconnect with myself. It helped me reconnect in my relationship with God, my intuition and confidence in a way that I have fallen really far away from. And I think it actually opened me up to new opportunities. It made me kind of value my voice in a way that I didn't expect, and the clarity that came with rest and reflection and having clear boundaries helped me not only understand, but believe that I could do hard things. And so that was an inflection point. The other was actually maybe about 2 years post diagnosis and post getting back into my day-to-day life, when I was in a job that I was doing very well at, but I was burning my own candle on both ends and got back into the patterns of doing everything for everyone all the time. And I completely lost myself again. I wasn't resting. I wasn't caring for my mind or my body that had become so resilient after my diagnosis. And I was starting to experience some side effects, some physical side effects from just pushing too hard, and was taking medication for those side effects. I was having neuropathy in my fingers and was taking a medication that helped with the neuropathy, but it also had some mental impacts as well. And I think already being in a place of vulnerability, lacking of rest, not caring for myself, just put me in a spot where things got really dark really fast. And I remember a time, again, this was 2 years post treatment, where I was curled up in the middle of the floor between my kids' rooms, crying. And my son, he was only 7 at the time, and my daughter was 4. My son came to me and he had to comfort me and tell me that everything was going to be okay. And that was a feeling of rock bottom, because I had gone from such a high and understanding how important it was to care for myself post treatment, to getting back into old patterns and having such a negative self-talk, and being so exhausted and not caring for myself, that I wasn't enough for myself. I was falling apart in front of my kids, and that was a really hard time. And that's where therapy actually came into my life, because it was a moment where I was like, I can't do this on my own. And my husband helped me get to that point too, because he's very supportive, but he saw that I was falling apart and was like, let me help find someone for you to talk to, because it's not working. And so working with a therapist and starting to name some of my emotions and starting to tease out what I was dealing with from a survivorship standpoint, what phase of life I was in, as in my mid 30s and young kids and demanding job. And then, what it meant to not take the time to care and love myself meant for everyone around me, what therapy helped me with. So that's the second. So the first, so the diagnosis was empowering, but then falling away from that and getting back into therapy was another piece for mental wellness. And then the final piece, and kind of what connected us and got me on the path of positive outlook, was menopause, after I had a cancer recurrence. So with my recurrence, life flipped on its head yet again, and I was forced to reevaluate everything that was going on in my life, and some of the side effects, the unknown side effects that medically induced menopause brings. And I was confused, and I was learning as much as I could, as fast as I could, and talking to my doctors, listening to podcasts, reading books. And I was learning that with my physical side effects and with some of the mental side effects I was having, again, I had to intentionally start to choose the life I wanted to lead in every area again. And so it kind of reminded me of that time, post cancer, and figuring out what my boundaries were, what worked for me, what didn't, and how I wanted to move through the world. And so with the self-reflection that medically induced menopause required, that was a reconnection to my mental health and wellness, and prioritizing myself again in very specific and intentional ways. So it's been a journey. It's an ongoing journey, but I really think that those 3 points in my life have been instrumental in my mental health walk.
Well, first of all, my heart is just, I don't even know. It's beating, it's heavy, it's big for you. So thank you so much for taking us through your inflection points. There's so much to unpack there, Teyonna, so
Yeah.
much. I mean, because who at, 35 years old, like that diagnosis, of course it's going to take you on a tailspin and it's going to change. And if you are a people pleaser, I love the fact that that simple word no changed the trajectory of your mental well-being, if you will. It was the ultimate form of self-care. So I think that that's brilliant in that. And then to have the second one, the journey into finally getting someone to talk to. So I want to go back a little, because I think it's great that you shared that. I think you gave us an abbreviated version of that, but I'd love to delve deeper into that. So talk a little bit about that journey through it.
Yeah, I think it's been a series of starting and restarting the process. And for me, when I start down a path of a new job or a new project, I put myself in it 100%. But sometimes in putting myself in an external, project or job, I can lose myself. I have found that I can lose myself if I don't have systems in place to reset and rest and recalibrate. And so with losing myself after my diagnosis, I was not taking time to rest at the end of the day and reflect on what I was proud of and what I had achieved. I was very much in a space where I was doing so much at work, and my job required that of me because I was kind of in a liaison role, and so I was laser focused on my to-do list and making sure that I took care of this email and that I followed up with this customer, and that I, was ready for the next meeting, and I had the meeting notes, ready for an upcoming presentation. And so at the end of the day, I would just focus on what I hadn't achieved and the fact that, you know, maybe I was really tired when it was bedtime with my kids and didn't put myself fully into it, or I was snippy with my husband. I would just go down kind of a negative rabbit hole, just listing all the things that I didn't do instead of celebrating what I was able to achieve and being proud of myself for that and building myself back up. And so I think not having systems in place and not being mindful of how important it is to speak kindly to myself and be gracious with myself is why I fell back into some of the more negative patterns. And I think with starting and restarting, taking a step back and realizing like, okay, this is not the path that I was headed down. Everything was great a couple years ago. Let me go back to, what worked well and reinstitute those things into my life is something that comes with grace and forgiveness and being like, okay, maybe I let the pendulum swing too far in one direction. That's okay. I'm not a horrible person for that. This is me talking to myself. I'm not a horrible person for that. Let me go back to what worked. And so being okay with knowing that life is going to ebb and flow and change, but making those adjustments and being okay with that makes a difference.
I think women in general do it to themselves. I hear so much. I was literally walking to go have my coffee and write in my journal this morning, and I'm going to Peru and I want to set my intentions for what I want to experience. And one of the things I'm thinking about is I'm a very positive person, but I go into things and I think about what could go wrong. And so it is natural to us. I'm sharing that to say that this is very natural for women. So instead of saying what could go right or what did we do that was good and acknowledging that. And so I think it's great that you are recognizing the need to not only give yourself grace, but to celebrate your wins, big and small, at every stage. I think what's remarkable is the ability, because I think that when you get out of something, when you're feeling better in any case scenario, you kind of go back to as humans, we go back to our old habits. It's really hard to stay in that positive space, that conditioned that you worked so hard to stay in at the time. So I think it's fantastic that you are back in that place. So what are you doing? So talk about how you're marching for mental wellness, like on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think it's exactly what you said. It's not always easy. It's recognizing that life is going to change. And for me, I can be an emotional roller coaster on most days. But what I have noticed for myself is when I'm operating at my highest self, taking my own advice, as Beyonce would say, it's for me, it's taking early morning walks. I'm not a morning person, but I have realized that the stillness of the morning and the time that I have to wake up and do my morning gratitude journaling, the time that I have to pray, the time that I have to reflect on what it is I want to achieve during the day is so grounding. And so when I carve out that time and I'm consistent about my morning routine, it makes a huge difference. And another thing that I've noticed and that helps me march towards my mental wellness and really operate at my highest level is kind of like what I mentioned earlier. I've really made it a habit to do nighttime reflections and journaling. I have 3 prompts, or no, 4 prompts actually, that help me get into a more calm and relaxed mind state before going to bed. And it's writing down what I love about myself for that day, what I'm proud of myself for that day, what I forgive myself for, and then what held me back and what change I can make in the day to come. And so that nighttime practice is just as important as the morning grounding, because that's where I can carve out space for grace and love and just a reminder that everything is ultimately going to be okay. And if I'm blessed enough to wake up in for the next day, there are, adjustments that I can make because I've reflected on it the night before in a kind way, for myself. So that's really been a game changer for me.
Ah, that's so beautiful. I love it. I myself do gratitude journaling every single morning, but I don't do the close. And I thank you for that because you've just taught me something. It is a great way to reflect. It's probably a lot better. It's not that I'm so much on my phone, but certainly on computer. Get you off the screen, get you into the mindset. And I like those 4 prompts. I am gonna look to put that in. So I'm excited. Thank
Oh, you're
you.
giving me a little bit more credit than I deserve. I am on my screen when I do those gratitude journals, but it's a mind shift because I know that I'm not scrolling or whatnot. I use my notes app, and so I can go back every now and then. But I mean, it's whatever works. It's if it's writing it out by hand or using the notes app or whatever. But I think it's just that time trying to rebreathe life into yourself at the end of the day that makes a huge difference for me.
I'm curious, when I introduced you as the founder of Positive Outlook. I'd love for you to share what you're doing. We talked a little bit about in the intro, but I think it would be great for you to share it with our audience.
Positive Outlook is actually a blog that I created shortly after my breast cancer recurrence. Just for a little bit of background, I had hormone sensitive invasive ductal carcinoma. And so that essentially means that the type of breast cancer that I had thrived and continued to grow in an environment where my body was naturally producing estrogen and progesterone. And so there is anti-hormone therapy, essentially, that I've been on in order to reduce the risk of another recurrence. And that anti-hormone therapy is ovarian suppression. So every month I have a shot to prevent my ovaries from producing estrogen and progesterone. And then I also take an aromatase inhibitor that prevents my body fat cells, my liver, my kidneys, all of the things that produce trace amounts of estrogen are essentially no longer doing that because of the aromatase inhibitors. And so that brings on very severe menopausal symptoms, especially when going from a place of always having a normal cycle or predictable cycle, I'll say, for my whole life to not having anything at all. And so I was experiencing extreme hot flashes. I was experiencing dizziness, vertigo, essentially, where it got to the point where I couldn't even drive because I was so dizzy. I was having heart palpitations. I was having joint pain, extreme brain fog. And all of those symptoms were a surprise to me because I thought that menopause, when I started the process, was just going to be a couple of hot flashes here and there. And I was so wrong and I was confused and I didn't really know what to do about that. I was struggling with survivor's guilt and pushing for more support. And I was struggling with, understanding what it meant for my long-term health. And so I started reading a lot of books. I started listening to seminars. And as I started to amass more and more knowledge about what the menopause journey looks like, I got to a point where I just had to journal and get some of my thoughts out and try and create a space for sharing stories and using shared stories to help with my own journey and to potentially help other women. So I created Pausitive Outlook essentially as an outlet for my own healing, but it has since evolved into a platform and continues to evolve into a platform where I talk about the importance of early detection because early detection saved my life twice. And then I also use it as a space to share some of the menopause resources that I'm learning about from a product standpoint, from a helpful resources standpoint, which doctors are putting out great information, which telehealth platforms are helpful, which books, open my eyes. So sharing those resources. And then I also use it as a space for creating community. And so about once or twice a year, I host events, intimate events that are called the Second Bloom. So we can talk about this new phase of life. And in those events, I invite women of all journeys. So whether they're in perimenopause, whether they are postmenopausal or just interested in learning more, those events come together in places and spaces where women are doing the things that they would love to do in general. So shopping, having brunch, because our time is limited, and having sisterhood and community in fun spaces it's life-giving to me. And so I hope it's the same for other women. And so when we come together in those less formal but fun spaces, we're also carving out time to talk about the menopause journey and what it can look like and what some solutions are. And so I feel like that community aspect is really important because I thought that I was alone in my journey when I first started, but I have since realized that I'm not close to being alone. And that feels really good. I think in the community events that I host, a lot of my friends and guests are able to put their learnings to action by scheduling appointments with the panelists who I bring in, and by being able to try out products that may or may not work for them in the moment, but it kind of gives them a sense of ownership and advocacy for themselves and what they're going through. And so Pausitive Outlook it has grown, past being my own personal blog and healing space to a space of, community and education. And so it brings me joy. It kind of supports my mental health as well. And it's my hope that it supports the menopause and the mental journey for all of the women who are touched by it.
I think it's fantastic. You started it as a blog, which gave you voice, which gave you agency, which was self-care, because giving voice to your experience is very cathartic. So that's fantastic. I applaud you so much, but I applaud more the recognizing and letting it sort of organically unfold based on the circumstances that you come across during your experience. And I think it's interesting as well, the niche a little bit of it, the coming out and it being around menopause, but having had medically induced menopause. That's a very different audience because
Yeah.
sensitivities there. All women are going to go through menopause, but when you are forced into menopause because of an illness, medication, whatever it may be, that is upending because you're not expecting it. Whereas, you do expect menopause when you reach certain age and certain milestones. And so I think going after that niche and really owning that space and giving space to those women and yourself is really magnificent.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, which is, you just don't even recognize what it is at the time. And so,
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's this space where I continue to evolve as well, and in making sure that the platform is adding value. I think what you hit on is really important and an area that I'm very passionate about because it is my story, but it's the story of a lot more women, more and more young women under 50 are being diagnosed with breast cancer at faster rates than women older than 50. And the majority of breast cancer diagnoses are hormone sensitive. With that, I think that there's a ton of attention, which there should be around breast cancer and research and supporting the journey and eradicating the disease as we know it. But I think from a survivorship standpoint, there are still gaps in care. And one of the things that was wonderful and very helpful to me with my diagnosis is even though I felt like there was so much information coming at me so fast, and it was almost like having to learn a new language with the words to describe what I was going through, understanding the different procedures, all of those things. There is support built in after a diagnosis where most medical facilities have nurse navigators who help us make appointments with different providers, with the breast surgeon, with the plastics, with a nutritionist, but to make it a little bit easier for the patient to just know where to go. But what I have personally found is post treatment, post active hands on treatment, there are fewer resources for survivors. I felt like when I rang the bell, it was such significant experience, but I was released into a world that I didn't quite know how to navigate. And I felt like with the menopausal symptoms that I was experiencing, my lack of knowledge of what those look like, I was putting together puzzle pieces, but not just puzzle pieces. It was almost like someone had dumped a box of puzzle pieces on me. I didn't have the top of what that puzzle looked like. And I didn't know what was survivorship, what was menopause, what was just, mourning the future that I thought that I was going to have. And I didn't know how many pieces there even were to that puzzle. So I'm putting those together and trying to navigate life as a younger survivor. And that's a challenge. There are some institutions that are doing great things, and they have seminars and support groups that do support the survivorship journey. And there are platforms that are getting out there and trying to educate women and physicians on what menopause looks like, what survivorship looks like. I really feel like there's a gap in care for younger survivors. And so inserting ourselves into the menopause conversation and saying, hey, look, we're not only dealing with extreme symptoms in the immediate term, but we're also at a higher risk of some of the long-term health changes that happen with menopause. So we're at higher risk for heart disease, higher risk for osteoporosis, higher risk for some of the mental changes, cognitive changes that happen with medically induced menopause. So we're being fast forwarded into kind of unknown territory and new health issues, but there isn't as much support as we need within that space. So I do want to use Positive Outlook as a platform to bring attention to that element as well. That survivorship is the greatest gift, but I do think that quality of life, and that means in the immediate term and the long term, is also something that survivors should be able to aspire to and not feel guilty about it, because I struggled with a little bit of survivor's guilt as well in trying to advocate for myself.
I've thought a lot about that since our last call. I want you to know, Teyonna, I've like really sat with survivorship and what that looks like. I celebrate the work you're doing, creating education and awareness about this particular group, and then creating community around it and letting other women feel seen. I don't know if there's anything else you want to share around, Positive Outlook or your journey. It's an interesting thing. I hesitate because I really try and focus on the present. So it's like, where do you imagine Positive Outlook going as you see it growing?
I do imagine it moving more, or envision it moving more into an advocacy space. So holding on to early detection and the importance of that, but really shifting into intentional advocacy for survivors like myself, for previvors like my daughter, and making sure that there is care and attention to this journey, and that women are being informed of what's to come, and through that information can make better choices about their own health care. I know that there is some great nonpartisan work and energy behind increased menopause education, and that's very important to me, because it means that I'm not walking into a doctor's office and trying to explain what's going on and asking, should I talk to a cardiologist? Should I talk to a neurologist? I think if there's more information and more education from a physician standpoint, some of those choices will be clearer for survivors, and I think for women who have a family history of breast cancer and may want to have a prophylactic oophorectomy or double mastectomy or something of that sort. If they understand what comes along with those changes, then they can just make better choices for themselves. So I think connecting the dots and being an advocate in the space, that quality of life really matters in the cancer community, is important. And so using Positive Outlook as a space for doing that is very motivating, and it excites me. And there are some organizations outside of the US that are bringing more attention to this journey. There's an amazing platform out of the UK called Menopause and Cancer. And the focus is on connecting doctors and healthcare providers to breast cancer survivors and explaining what happens during this phase of life and what survivorship can look like. And so providing education and being an advocate for quality of life is so necessary. And I definitely want Positive Outlook to join in on that effort from an advocacy standpoint.
I love that. I love the advocacy. And what it equals to me is giving women agency. And I just know that it's going to just continue to grow, because it's a conversation that is finally starting to open up. So if you can be, one of the leaders in that, which I believe you are and will be, Positive Outlook will do so much for women, and in particular in the space you're talking about. So,
Yes.
so I could talk to you forever, Teyonna. You're just amazing. And I love the work you're doing. And I love the way you show up and are so just authentically yourself. This is your platform to give a message to women of all ages, of all backgrounds, of all cultures. What do you want to leave them with?
Two things. I want to leave them with two things. First is that no experience is wasted, in a way that not promoting toxic positivity or anything like that, but I have learned that even some of the hard times that I've had to endure have been, the opportunities for growth. I didn't think that while going through it, but being able to reflect back and having the privilege of reflecting back, I've been able to use the tough times, my own, cancer journey, my own mental health struggles as a place of learning. And I just want to remind everyone that our paths are ever evolving, and we're exposed to people and situations at different points in our life. And I think holding on to those experiences and encounters can ultimately, serve us all in the future and contribute to the greater good. So no experience is wasted, and we can all use them to our power and our highest good. So that's one thing to just remember, that even the hard times can, be a blessing to someone else, or even to ourselves. The last thing, I wouldn't be an advocate if I didn't say this, but do a self breast exam. Know you're normal. It is so important to understand that our bodies are changing at all times. And when we have a good grasp of what's normal for ourselves, then we can make choices to care for ourselves. Self breast exams can be a little bit intimidating if you're not familiar with how to do one, but it's super easy. The best time to do a self breast exam is 3 days after your cycle ends, because our breasts go through different changes throughout the month. And so that's going to be the most normal baseline from a hormonal standpoint. So 3 days after your cycle ends is a great time to do a self breast exam. If you have hit menopause and are no longer having a cycle, just choose the same day every month to do a self breast exam and notice any changes there. Because when we know what's normal for us, like I said, we can make choices and set up appointments to get checked out. And early detection really does save lives. I had stage 1C invasive breast cancer, and was able to get treatment and do things that maybe I wouldn't have if I didn't do that chance self breast exam. So get in there and get comfortable with yourself.
I so admire you. I just want to thank you for getting under the hood and for sharing your journey. Thank you. Forgot one thing.
Oh, okay.
How can people find you?
They can find me online and on Instagram and TikTok. And so my handle is Pausitive Outlook, but the way that that's spelled is PAUSITIVE Outlook, kind of like menopause. So Pausitive Outlook on Instagram, on TikTok, or pausitiveoutlook.com on the internet. So look for me and follow me and share your journey as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Under the Sisterhood. If you haven't already, please give us a quick rating and review on Apple or Spotify. And make sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn so you can hear from more amazing women. This podcast is created and hosted by Under the Sisterhood LLC and Elizabeth Elfenbein, produced by Elizabeth Elfenbein and Matt Butler, and edited by Matt Butler. The music is by Ayla Schaefer. Her song, Rose.